Today I'm going to be showing you some of those beautiful sugar flowers that you sometimes see on wedding cakes. And for this you're going to need a little bit of specialist equipment. I've got here a fair range of the sort of things that you might need. I've got some instant pastelage and I'm going to be showing you how to make that up in a minute. This rolls out very thin but dries very hard. I've got a little muslin bag with some corn flour in it so that I don't get too much out in one go. I've got some colours. These are concentrated so they don't wet out the paste. Gums for making a glue that you can stick your petals together with. Cutters, and there's a fair range of these. Pins, a cranked palette knife, and you'll see me using this and you'll understand why, as you see it, that I use a cranked one. Tweezers, modelling tools, cocktail sticks, dusting colours, different gauges of wire. Remember, the number on the wire actually tells you the thickness. The higher the number, the thinner the wire. Stamens for putting into your flowers. This is parafilm, which is a floristry tape that we use to tape the sprays together. A rolling pin. You don't want a big one because you're rolling small amounts of paste. I've got a wooden skewer that I'm going to do the pulled flowers on. Scissors. Now you want a good sharp pointed pair of scissors. You want one hefty pair for cutting the wire. A selection of brushes. Some foam sponge that you can set your flowers into. Some cotton wool for holding your petals up. And you want something to set the flowers in, and I use a little artist's palette here. And also, this is in fact just a microwave tub which my husband has drilled holes in, and I can set the flowers into this and it stops them breaking. And last of all, plastic bags. So having seen all that equipment, the first flower I'm going to show you is a moulded rose, and for that you simply need your hands, a plastic bag, a knife and the paste to make the flower out of. Now this is sugar paste which I've kneaded into a cone. And I'm going to take another small ball of paste, about the size of a large pea. Pop it inside the plastic bag and flatten it. Then use your fingertips to thin the top edge. Now peel it out of the plastic bag and you'll see that I've got a thicker end that I'm holding and a thinner end that I've actually done by using my fingertips in the bag. Put it onto the cone and wrap one side down. And then fold the other side over the top, but don't close it up completely. And then you can waste the rose in. Now the reason I'm using sugar paste for this is the fact that you can use up whatever you've got left after coating your cake. It doesn't have to be pastelage. In fact, it's easier to do these sort of roses just with sugar paste. The second petal is made exactly the same way, but this time I'm going to put it on directly opposite the join. So I'm going to turn it away from me and bring the petal towards me. Now one side you close down, the other side you leave open, the top you tip back and just pinch it in. The next petal is done in the plastic bag again. Remember, just thin that top edge. You can get it really paper thin, but don't thin the petal too far down, because if you do it'll just flop. It's all an optical illusion, this rose. The centre of the petal goes opposite the join. Pull it towards you, and this time you seal both ends down. Turn the top edge back and pinch it. When I said it's an optical illusion, I meant it's only the thin edge of the petal that gives the impression that this rose is a nice fine one. So the last petal for the bud is made by doing the same thing. Centre of the petal goes opposite this join and tucks under the one you left open. So you tuck that under there and then fold that round again. Bring the other edge round, turn it back and pinch it. It's the pinching that gives it the characteristic of a rose. Now I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to pull the petals on to the cone so that they're all stuck down. Waste it in and cut it off. Now this is a rose that you can make and put directly onto your cake. It doesn't have to be wired or set or anything like that. And to make a bud to go with it, I'm going to roll a cone, but a much smaller one. Put that down. Make a little petal again, the same way as you did before. Put it into the bag, squash it, thin the top edge, peel it out. And you can see I'm not using corn flour or icing sugar or anything here. The paste will stick to itself. It doesn't need anything to hold it. Put the cone in the middle and fold it down. Then fold the top edge over it. Waste it in at the back. Just turn that edge, pinch off what you don't need, and you've got a little bud to go with your rose. I've put the measured amount of water into the bowl, and I'm sieving the powder, as you can see, through a fine sieve. Don't worry about what's going on the tabletop, because you're going to sieve the rest of that out in a minute. I've actually got 7/8 of the tub in my sieve. Give it a shake and work it through. Now the amount of water is very important. You must measure it, and I've actually got a conical measuring cone there. Work it through until the water absorbs all the powder that you've got. Make it a drier paste than a wetter paste at this stage. So you don't want it wet and sloppy, you want it dry. Incorporate all of the powder. Now there are many recipes in lots of books for pastelage. I find this one very easy because it doesn't need anything more than this. You don't need a mixer or anything else. Right, so you can see that it's dry. Now I'm going to sieve out the rest of the powder onto the work surface. You can leave this for about 5 minutes covered in the bowl, which gives the gums time to start to work. What I'm going to do is turn it out, and then I have to knead all the rest of the powder into the paste. You probably think it won't go, but in fact it does. And you end up with a ball of paste that looks like this. And you can see it's quite elastic. Now the main thing about it is you must keep it airtight. This paste is designed to dry quickly and to dry hard. So make sure you put it into a plastic bag and keep it as airtight as possible until, of course, you've made your flowers. Now I'm going to show you how to make a pulled flower, and the first thing you need for this is some hooked wire. So I've cut the wire into 3 and I'm bending it over the back of the scissors so that they form hooks. And if you do 2 or 3 at once, you get there a lot faster. Now a pulled flower is made using your mixture of sugar paste and pastelage. And the reason it's called a pulled flower is the fact that you actually pull it. If your fingers feel sticky, dust them with a little bit of corn flour. Roll it into a cone, flatten it, and the flattened end you actually put onto a wooden skewer. Now I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to cut it with a craft knife. Now most flowers have 5 petals, so we'll try and cut it evenly into 5. Take it off the skewer and open these out. I'm just going to dust my fingers again so that they're not going to stick. And I'm going to flatten and pull the petals. So put your index finger underneath, flatten it with your thumb, and then very gently pull it out. Flatten it and pull. And so you can then shape the petals by pinching them. It's getting a bit sticky on my fingers there, so I'll just dust the other hand. Then the hooked wire Pick up one with a small hook because it's a small flower. Dip the hook into gum arabic. Now this is gum arabic and it's 3 to 1. 3 of water to 1 of the gum arabic powder. You just shake it the two together and you'll get a glue. As you pull the hook into the flower, hook it onto one side and then gently roll it. It's just a little bit sticky here. Until it sticks to the wire. And that's what we call a pulled flower. And you can also put stamens into your little pulled flowers. Simply cut the ends of the stamens off and tuck them down inside. And you can paint a little calyx on the back with green food colour. Now it's very important that you roll your paste as thin as possible and always lift it. And now you can see why I'm using a cranked palette knife. A very good test to see if you've got it as thin as you need it is to lay it over something and you should be able to read through it. Now I'm going to use some plunger cutters, but first I'm going to cover my paste because remember it does dry out very quickly. This is a plunger cutter and it has a plunger in it. So cut, wipe the base and push it down onto your piece of foam sponge which I've dusted with corn flour. I also was rolling out on corn flour so that the paste wouldn't stick. The reason I'm wiping the base of the cutter is so that I don't get furry edges around the edge of the petals. We've got 3 sizes of the plungers, so you can get a variety of flowers. And obviously you can get quite quick at this. Just show you the little one as well. It really is just a cut and a plunge. You don't have to use a cutter with a plunger, but obviously it does make it quicker. You can use a cutter that doesn't have one. The principle is the same. Cut, twist so that you pick up the petal in the cutter, wipe the base, and you can actually see the furry edges I was referring to before. Now I'm going to have to use a tool to push the flower out of the cutter and then into the foam. But as you can see, the same principle applies. Now that's the cutting. In order to be able to wire your flowers up into a little spray, you must remember to put the holes in them before they dry out. And I'm just going to use a needlepoint tool, but a pin or a hat pin will do. Just push down, make sure you've got the hole in the centre. So having cut the flowers out, we now need to be able to wire them into a spray. And to do that, we let them dry, and we've got some stamens. I usually line them up between my fingers and then cut them in half. Remember you've got 2 ends to these, so use both ends. Very gently pick up your flower and pop the stamen down through the hole. And thread it down the stamen until it's about halfway along. Just a touch of royal icing into the middle to hold it, and then pull the stamen down into the flower until it's into position. Now it's much better if you leave these flowers to dry right out overnight before you start to do this, because then you won't break so many. And I just leave it standing on its end until the stamen has set. Now you might want to make some little buds to go with your flowers, and that's very easy. Just take a little tiny ball of paste, roll it into a ball, and see how small it is, then roll it into a cone. Get a stamen, dip it into your gum arabic, put it into the wider end of the cone, right, and then just twist it so that it's stuck. Then to finish it off, I'm going to use a pair of scissors and I'm just going to mark it. I'm not going to cut through it, but just mark it. And then slight twist and you've got a bud. Now in order to wire your flowers up into a spray, you need some floristry tape. This is one of the few things that you get value for money for these days, because not only do you use it full width, and I'm cutting it up the length, but you also stretch it. So it stretches right out. I'm using the white wire, which is 24 gauge, so it's quite a heavy one, twisted the wire into the top of the tape, pick up a bud and put it into the top and twist. And the action is that you're rubbing your thumb along your finger so that the tape is turning and catching the end of your flower. So a couple of buds and a couple of your little flowers, little tiny ones. Remember, if you're going to variegate the size, make sure you put the little ones at the top. And each time I put it in, I'm coming down slightly lower so that it's about 1/4 of an inch below the one above. And I'm holding the tape down so that as it turns, the flowers are coming down the stem. Next one in, twist it, and you would go from 3, 5, 7 flowers. Usually you work in odd numbers when you're doing this sort of work. And we come to the big ones. Keep the tape pulled out as far as it can, so stretch it as you're working. And there you have your little spray. Once you've got to the bottom of the wire, then you can cut it off. And as you can see, we've got some others here done in different colours, and they really do make very pretty arrangements on your cakes, as you'll see later. To finish off this section of small flowers, I'm going to show you how to make a daisy. Roll a ball and then roll a cone. Now this method is what we call a Mexican hat. The reason it's called a Mexican hat is you put the cone down and you roll out the brim, so you're left with a tall conical piece and a thin brim. You can use a skewer, which is what I'm doing, or you could use a scriber, paintbrush, anything that's round. And what you want to do is to get this part as thin as possible. Don't make the cone too thick or you're not going to get the cutter down over the top of it. I've got it on some corn flour so that it doesn't stick. When you think you've got it thin enough, put the cutter down over the top. My cone is still a little bit too thick for the diameter of the cutter because it's really quite narrow. Put it down over the top and cut. And you can see how the paste pulls away from the cutter itself. Now you want to push it out of the cutter using a soft brush, and then I'm going to rest it against my finger while I indent each of the petals. You can in fact cut the petals in half if you want to and put a second layer on top. Then indent the centre, and I'm going to take away a lot of this at the back because for a daisy it's too high. There are other flowers where you want to have it long, but for a daisy it's quite shallow at the back. Just put that down for a minute. Now these are the centres which I made previously and they're now hard and dry. To get the impression on the top I used a small piece of tulle and I pulled it down over the centre, and you can see you get this little ridged effect. Pick it up and brush the back of it with a little bit of your gum arabic glue. Then very carefully pick up the daisy and thread the centre through it so that it just sits on the top. And there you've got your little daisy. Here the daisies have been used on a cake. This appears in my book of wedding cake designs. Now the buttercups could have been made by any of the 3 methods I've just shown you. They've been coloured a deep yellow and glazed with the gum arabic solution. Now we're going on to some larger wired flowers, and the first one I'm going to show you is the carnation. I've got my shapes cut out here, and I'm going to hold the knife in a vertical position and cut round in each one of these indents. so that I'm using the full width of the blade. Now I'm going to go and cut just a little bit on each one. The reason I'm doing this is because a carnation has very raggedy edges. I'm going to use my cocktail stick and I'm going to frill it. Picking it up, paint just the centre. And here I've got my centre prepared. What I've done is to cut the ends off a stamen, tape it onto the wire and just wrap a little bit of the paste around it. And I'm going to put that right through the middle of the carnation. Fold it over and then paint 1/3. Fold that over, turn the whole flower over onto your finger and paint another bit there. So I've done what they call a linen fold. So I've got one fold underneath, one in the middle and one on top. Then pinch the whole thing in and roll it round so that it sticks. Because you should do that stage first and let it dry. Your second petal is cut and frilled in exactly the same way. Just paint the centre again and taking your dried first petal, take it down through the middle. And then just turn it so it hangs upside down and pinch it in with your fingers and your thumb. And then get it so that it all comes into that first one. And you can see how you're starting to build up the carnation. Now you can put 3 petals on, 4, as many as you like. And you can see how it does build up into rather a pretty flower. This one now has 3 petals on it. And just to finish it off, I'm going to put a calyx on it. I need a little bit of green paste, which I roll out. Cut it. Take it out of the cutter. Paint the back of it with your gum. Pop it over the back and down onto the flower. Now there are all sorts of ways of doing a calyx, but I find this is quite a fine one. In fact, a carnation does have a fairly big calyx, but it tends to look very heavy when you put them on a cake. And that's your completed flower. And now I'll show you how to make a sweet pea. The first thing you need to do for a sweet pea is to make a double hooked wire. What I mean by that is you'd make one hook and then you turn it and you make a second hook. And you want to get a little bit of paste, just a small bit, flatten it between your finger and your thumb, dampen it with the gum and fold it around the hook. So put the hook in the middle and just fold it round. All you're doing here is making a pad, or really the pea, that goes into the middle of the sweet pea. It is very important that this area here is in a straight line with the wire. Now hang that up to dry. And I've got some paste that I've rolled out. Always make sure before you start cutting that it's free on the board. Now the first cutter I'm going to use is actually a rose petal cutter, and I'm going to cut it. It's just shaped like a large teardrop. You don't have to do anything to this petal except to put a little bit of gum around the edge. Take your dried pod and put it in the middle and then fold the petal around it, making a seam line at the front, and then bend it so that you form what we call a headman's axe. And again, it's very important that you get this edge here lined up with the wire. I'll hang that one up. Now these strangely shaped cutters are the ones we use for the sweet pea, and the first one I'm going to use is this one. Cut out your petal, lift it up and put it on your hand. Now if your hands are hot, you can actually dust them with a little bit of corn flour first. The tool I'm using is what we call the dog bone, and I'm going half on the petal and half on my hand, and it's actually thinning and frilling the edge of the petal because it's not a very frilled one. Just ball in there a little bit with the end of the tool and paint a V with your gum arabic along this line here. So you take the headman's axe that you've got dry and you put the point of the axe through the gap and then drop the petals forwards, just catching at the back, and then very carefully just open it up a little bit. And that's the first stage now of the outer petals of the sweet pea. And hang this one up, and now rather than do it on my hand, I'm going to cut this outer petal and put it on the sponge, because some people have a lot of trouble with if their hands are hot. And this time I'm going to take the dog bone tool half on the sponge and half on the petal. Turn it over and then just very gently ball it, and you can see the petal is frilling up around and getting into a nice shape. Now I'm going to put it onto my hand just to paint in the same area again with the gum. So I'm using the same V effect that I did on the other petal. Now I'm going to take my dried petal, which has the first of the outer petals on it, and line that up so that the point of the outer petal are all lined up together. Just drop it forward and pinch it very gently at the back, and then you can just stand it up and the flower should just open up slightly. Now I'm just going to cut the calyx using the little star cutter. Take it out and put it onto your hand. You see it is very tiny. Now just dampen that with a little bit of the gum, just in the middle. Right. And then I'm going to get my flower, which is hardened, straighten the wire and slide the little star down the wire, and then just get it to sit on the bottom. Don't fold it in too hard, and there's your finished sweet pea. Now I'm going to show you how to make a briar rose. For this we use a rose cutter. Cut out the petals, and you'll need 5. The easiest way to frill it is to put it onto your piece of sponge and either use your finger or a ball tool, push down into the sponge and just pull it off so that you shape the petal. Now you have to have 5 of those, and you want to have a container to set it in, and I'm going to use my paint palette. Put a little bit of wax paper into the bottom of a container that's going to shape the flower for you, and onto that pipe a ball of royal icing. Take one of your 5 petals and tuck the end into the ball of royal icing, and then each petal overlaps the one beside it. Now you can actually assemble these flowers when the petals are dry like this, or in fact when they're still soft. But if you're putting them together when they're soft, just use your gum arabic, but you'll get a slightly different shaped flower if you do that. When the 5 petals are in place, you can then take some stamens, cut the ends off, and then I use my tweezers to position them. And I've got 5 green ones here which go in to the icing. Now I'm going to put some little white ones in the middle. So just bunch them together so they've got more or less the same length, and cut again. These are slightly longer than the green ones, and you can put as many or as few as you like into the flower. Now remember, once you start adding stamens, and these aren't edible, it means the flower is no longer edible. You can buy coloured nonpareils, and these you just sprinkle onto the wet icing, and then they are edible. And as you can see, when the flowers are assembled on a spray with some of the little blossoms that we did before, it really does look very pretty. Now, using the same technique, I want to show you how you can make a large open rose. I've used the rose cutters, and there are 5 in the set, and I've made 6 of the largest and 5 each of the other sizes. So that means you've got 26 petals all told, just to make one flower. I've got a circle of wax paper which I've made into a shallow cone, and I'm going to pipe a line of icing around the edge. I'll just put a little bit there just to hold it so it doesn't move for a moment. Pick up a petal and just tuck the edge of each petal into that cone of icing. It doesn't matter if they don't overlap. The reason we have 6 rather than 5 is the fact that you want to make this a large flower, and 5 is just not enough to get you right round the whole circle. So having caught the ends of each of those in the icing, we now fill up the rest of the cone up to the edge of the petals with some more royal icing. Right. Take your next size petal and, keeping it flat, tuck it in. And I usually start between 2 petals. So you go round and you put the next row in. Don't put your petals down this way, because you'll find you'll end up with the centre coming up through the flower. Tuck them in, keep them down. Go to the next size and position them in between the last lot. So you can see we're decreasing in size as we go into the centre. Not quite in position, you can just move them round. Now the next size down. Tuck those in. And then we come to the last lot, which curl into the centre. And then you finish it off by cutting quite a few stamens . And again, using your tweezers, put them down into the centre of the flower. Now, one of the advantages of making a big flower like this is the fact that you only need 1 or 2 on a spray. If you're making very small flowers, you're going to obviously need a lot more to fill the spray up. As the icing dries, it will hold the petals into place, and of course the stamens. And there's your large open rose. Now, to make an orchid like that, you start off with the throat. I've got a little bit of green paste here, and I'm going to use my dog bone tool just to shape the underneath part, as you can see, to curve it in. And then I'm going to take my piece of wire, if I can pick it up, dampen the end with your cornflour, with your gum arabic, and pull it onto the wire so that you make it stay in position. Then take a little, tiny little bit of white paste, roll it into a ball, really is a very, very small piece. And this little bit you put on the end of his nose. And then I use my tweezers just to indent it so that it looks like that. Now hang that up to dry, and the next thing you do is to roll out some of your cream coloured paste and we then cut out the throat itself. I'm going to cut the throat with this big, slightly frilled cutter. Take the rest of the paste away. Lift it up and then cut 2 indents into here. I'm just going to use the scissors for this. So I've now cut these sections out. Put down a little bit more corn flour, and like you did with the carnation, just frill this edge from the cut area around the front of the throat. In the middle of the throat, the back, you put a little bit of yellow. Roll it into a long cigar shape, then bend it forward and stick it onto the throat. You can see I've got it quite a long way from the end. Pick it up and taking the dry centerpiece, position the end of it at the point of the throat and then wrap these 2 around until they meet on the top. You can curve it over your finger. These 2 areas have got to be slightly bald, cupped. And then you can let that set. Now this has to be done the day before you actually make the orchid, and you can see I've got one here that is now set into position. We bring the orchid to life by giving it a little bit of dusting. And I've got a soft brush and some yellow and some brown dusting colours. So dust into the throat itself with the yellow, and then a little bit of the brown at the front. Now this is a cymbidium orchid, and these come in browns and creams and greens and colours of that sort. And you can just put a few little lines. I'm using a marking pen, but you could in fact use some colour on the end of a paintbrush. And then it has a series of dots going up into the throat itself. And now we go on to form the petals of the orchid. So we need to roll out a little bit more paste, and we use the other 2 cutters. Cut 2 of the wider petals and 3 of the long, thin, narrow ones. Take your excess paste away. And I'm going to use my needle point. Remember, you can use a pin or you can use anything with a point. And I'm just marking down the petals just to give it a little bit more life. Now, the cymbidium orchid is not a frilly orchid, and this looks nice on masculine cakes, but it's rather nice. These larger petals, I'm taking the lines slightly round. And to assemble the orchid into position, take a little ball of paste and I'm going to use an apple tray. So go along to your local greengrocer and see if you can get one of these polystyrene trays. Just move this slightly. Start off by putting a small ball of paste into the centre of the tray. And then you take the first of your long petals put some gum onto the ball of paste and take the first of the long petals and drape it lengthways down the apple tray. Then you form a propeller shape by putting the other two long ones down that way. Each time you lay them in position, gum over the top, so that you've now got this three-pointed propeller shape. This back one you can curl forward as well. Sometimes they go back, sometimes they go forward. Now just pick up the petal and soften the edge by running the tool down your hand on the petal itself. A little bit of gum, and you can see I'm actually building up layer upon layer here, so I've got quite a little solid pad in the middle. Do the same with the other petal. Soften the edge, put that into position. So now you can see that I've got two narrow ones at the front, one at the back, and then the two larger petals coming up almost like arms. So you've got the legs, the arms and the head. And then to finish the orchid off, paint a little bit of gum in the centre, and taking the throat, curve the wire, and then thread it down through that centre pad, straight through the polystyrene, and pull it through. And there's your orchid. And now we come to the final assembly of the sprays onto a cake, and I need to show you how to make a ribbon loop. Take some ribbon and make 3 loops, all approximately the same size. Turn the ribbon so it's facing into the palm of the hand and cut off what you don't want. Put your wire underneath, fold the tails back over the wire, pull the wire parallel to the ribbon into the middle and twist it up tight. And that makes your ribbon loops, and you can make them in all sizes. Now to actually assemble the spray on the cake, we need a little bit of petal paste or sugar paste that matches the cake itself. Roll it into a ball and then dome it and sit that on the top of the cake. I've just stuck it on with a little bit of water so it's in position. Then we take our tweezers and we start by putting some ribbon loops straight down into the middle of that dome of paste. Go the other way. And I'm going to fix these into place with a little bit of royal icing, just to hold them. So I'll put one on each side. And then I fill in the gap between the two flowers with more ribbons. I've got some tails here. It's just 1 loop and 2 tails. And position those into place. And then you can use your little sprays to fill in any gaps. Hold the spray in line with the end of the tweezers so that when you put it into that ball of paste, you've got complete control over where it goes. Don't forget that these are wired, so bend the wire if you want them to curve. get a much better finish to your sprays if you get used to using the tweezers, because if you start pushing in with your fingers you're going to break the flowers. And then you can bring your finished cake and put it on top of the wedding cake. Now I've only shown you a very small selection of sugar flowers. This art can be applied to all sorts of things, like artificial or silk flowers. And here's a few examples of the sort of things that you can make using these techniques. So now, goodbye until next time.